I can't imagine. You know, when I first moved up there, I thought, well, yeah, that's the humor. But that's well, that's strange. I don't want to do that country western thing. But anyway, I understand the challenge now. After having lived here for 20 years again. No, I didn't know very much. She had covered the community.
Any advice on Margaret?
Oh, and when you do something, well, you read that. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's Margaret.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, that's Margaret. Very simple. No, she'll be back, and that's Margaret. Yeah.
Yeah, she is. And she's got a lot more on her life too.
No, she'll be back, yeah.
She liked that job so much, so I hope she didn't get fired.
I think it works. Because I heard her complain about that.
Everybody has to sit down now.
Yeah.
Welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this frosty morning. Kind of thought spring was here early. I've seen robins already, and here it was snowing again yesterday. So that's the nice thing about the weather in Ohio. If you don't like it, wait a few minutes and it'll change.
Spring is here, the weather isn't.
Yeah, spring didn't come. I've seen a couple neat pictures on that, and I should have pulled them out and put them up on the screen, but I forgot to do that. So we'll try and do that in the future. Do we have any announcements?
Just next Saturday, April 2nd, we will be cleaning up the church for the following, week? On the 10th, we will be hosting our radio.
Right.
So we have that to look forward to. And I brought a sign-up sheet for the food that we're doing.
Great.
And remember, if you're going to purchase some of that food, so don't feel obligated to sign more than 1 or 2 times. But I'll put this out for everyone.
Yes, we are going to Gordon's to get the mainstays, and Kenny is bringing a ham. That's the big, the centerpiece, most appreciated. So if you can bring desserts or relish trays or salad or anything you want to contribute, we'll be fine without it, but it would always be nice to have it.
And with our cleaning, we will set up for the dinner as well up here.
Yes.
So that we can host everyone without having to walk the stairs.
We're bringing the tables and the chairs up here. We're not expecting more than 20, so we should have plenty of room.
That's right.
In the back.
And we're talking about the logistics and things. We can do that on our cleaning day, but I will put the sheet out there. And the only other matter, you may recall a few years back we attended the Temple in Piqua for a delightful calligraphy lesson with the Jewish congregation there. They had put out an event that's coming up that we're more than welcome to attend. It's basically the biblical year of fallow fields, celebrate Earth Day, and this year by the Shemitah year. And it's one of their traditions, and they've actually invited us. It's on Saturday, April 30 at 1 p.m. as congregation at Emma Pickle. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Yes, So I'll put that up as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in going to that. So if anybody wants to maybe have a meal over there or something, do another congregational thing if people want to do that. All right. Anything else? All right. We're continuing. The war in Ukraine is getting actually worse than it was. We still have our sunflowers. Actually, the daffodils I brought last week look pretty good. The daffodils I pulled this morning have been frozen last night, so they're all drooping, which is kind of interesting. So we're going to stay with our sunflower theme and our Ukraine theme. And because of that, we talked a couple of weeks ago about death and dying, and we're going to talk about loss, grief, and bereavement today. I know that's hard for some people, so I wanted to let people know ahead of time in case it would be difficult. We're not going to be anything real emotional about this. We're just going to try and find ways to deal with it and discuss it a little bit. All right, our prelude, Jesus Loves Me. Very nice. Jesus loves me, something we need to hear in times of troubles, and never forget, we love you too. Okay, first slide. I've been trying to open each time with a legislative update, which is pretty discouraging, as we talked about the concealed carry thing has passed and signed by the governor. I'm moving on to, this is because of the Ukraine, what's going on there. This is a picture of a Ukrainian fairy tale, the man fighting the dragon. You can guess who's the fighter and who the dragon is. And the interesting little tidbit that they threw in, fairy tales tell a lot about the culture that they come from, tells a lot about the people that are there, and they are using it to somewhat predict what happens in that culture. Ukrainian fairy tales are full of plucky lads who, faced with difficulties, find a way to learn, fight, educate, work their way out of trouble. They depend on themselves and they never give up. You can kind of see that in what's going on in the Ukraine right now with the way they are defending their country. Russian fairy tales, in contrast, usually have a person who, a young man who does not really do anything to protect himself. He pleads for assistance, and in the end of the fairy tale, there is a magical intervention that saves the country or saves the story or saves the person and his princess. The difference being the Ukrainians who have to work their own way through versus the Russians who are depending on magic. If you look at the way the war is progressing, you can kind of see that the Russians came in depending on magic, and the magic of powerful new weaponry and fancy weaponry is not really working for them. So it's a lesson maybe we can draw, or maybe we're superimposing a lesson on top of something that's not really there, but I thought it was interesting. Okay, our chalice lighting is by William Feiss. It's for a memorial service, and we are kind of shadowing a memorial service today. We light this flame as our fervent plea to brighten the dark corners of our hearts. We hold this flame, for in it is the promise of warmth for souls grown cold in loss and despair. We kindle this light, that we might continue to find comfort in its warmth, strength in its light, holiness in its presence. We follow this light, that it might illuminate our search for purpose, for meaning, and for forgiveness. We light this chalice, knowing even as the sacred spark of life is extinguished in the ensuing darkness, its light will still burn bright with all the memory and hope of its all too brief flash across our lives. We light this flame of life, of love, and truth for the divine promise of healing hearts. So we reach out to the Ukraine for that. Our opening hymn, I think Roberta has passed out the sheets. We're going to do everything free form out of the sheets today rather than out of the hymnal. For the healing of the nations. That we sincerely and prayerfully ask for. Our children's story kind of fits our theme. It's something that I found online as well. And we may have a little discussion afterwards.
Welcome to Storyberries Radio. You can read along with any of our stories, all for free at our website, storyberries.com. Circles by Alex Latimer at Bundash. On a cliff, there lived a young vulture with his mother. When he was old enough to fly, his mother took him high into the air, and they circled together, watching the ground below. "I want to show you something beautiful," she told her son. They saw an old gemsbok staggering through the heat. "Look there, that gemsbok won't last long." Sure enough, the buck collapsed right there and died. The two vultures flew down. "This isn't beautiful," said the young vulture to his mother. "This is horrible." "I know," said his mother. "Death is very difficult and very sad, but it is also beautiful." "No ways," said the young vulture. "Yuck." "Just wait," she said. "We will come back here soon, and you will see." The next week, they visited the dead buck. Its skeleton was clean and white, and tiny plants had started to grow between the bones. The week after that, the shoots had grown tall and blossomed. A butterfly sipped at the flowers, and a songololo rested in their shade. A week later, a pair of weavers was picking the leaves to build a nest. Bees were collecting pollen from the blossoms, and a spider had made her home between the buck's horns. And a week after that, they saw a young gemsbok nibbling the tasty shoots. "Well," said the vulture's mother, "look at the life one buck has given. He has given a spider a home and weavers a nest, fed bees and butterflies, sheltered a songololo, and helped the next generation of buck grow strong." The young vulture smiled. The two of them flew back to their nest high up on the cliff. "It is not just our bodies we leave behind when we die," said the mother vulture. "We also leave our lessons and our love and our memories." "Where do we leave all these things?" asked the little vulture. "We leave them in our children and in our family and friends. You are already my green patch on earth, little vulture, and you will be, forever." The end. Thank you for reading with Storyberries.com. Free stories for kids.
Interesting story, and what have we always said about fairy tales? They're kind of peculiar in the way they approach things, and they don't always make a total, complete sense. So what are the two things you can pick up from this one? Number one, what country did it come from? I would guess South Africa with gemsbok. Not something we see around here. And the accent was also either South African or Australian. She's almost sounded Australian, but I don't think they have gemsboks in Australia either. And what was the other most glaring error that you find in this fairy tale concerning vultures and a dead gemsbok? No dinner bell.
Yeah.
I mean, they came back the next week and the skeleton was picked clean.
Yeah.
They didn't make a mention of who was doing the picking. So everybody turns or takes a story and turns it to the story they want to create. And this was a story for kids to say that death is basically part of the circle of life and that every death contributes to the continuing of life. They didn't mention the part where the vultures are continuing their life. So when the little vulture comes down and says yuck, I don't think he would say yuck, I think he would say yum. That's what he would say. So learn from the stories, and I guess what I'm trying to say as well is appreciate what the stories are telling you, and appreciate who is telling the story, and appreciate what they put in and what they leave out. Okay, our affirmation is from Natalie Fenimore. We offer blessings for life and the end of life. Blessings for the dying, blessings for the caregiver holding love and carrying the burden. Blessed is the body, youth claimed by death, elder claimed by death. Blessed is all creation moving toward one ending in order to begin again. Let us bless the wake, the gathered, the gathering, the Shiva, which is, I'm sure you're aware, is the Jewish tradition. The food brought and cooked and delivered, whether eaten or not. Bless the toasts, the drinks crashing down throats, drink shared with the ground in remembered friendship. Blessed are the stories told with tears and loud, loud, loud laughter. Bless the hair cut short, the hair grown long in mourning. Different cultures have different expressions of mourning. Some cultures shave their hair, the women shave their hair as a sign of mourning. Others let their hair grow long as a sign of mourning. Blessed is the black for mourning. Blessed is the white worn for mourning. Blessed is the body wrapped for grieving. Blessed is the showing of pain. Blessed is the celebration of life. Bless the ashes. Bless the dust. Bless the grave. Bless the grave digger. Bless the dirt and feel of it in the hands. If you've ever watched British funerals, they actually take a handful of dirt and throw it in on the coffin to signify the end, the realization that they are participating in the end of this life and the transformation into the next life. Blessed the stones on the grave, the flowers, the headstone, the monument. Bless the inscription. Bless the naming of the dead. Blessed are the memories. Bless those who feel, who hurt, who hate. Bless the anger and the sorrow, the fear and confusion, the compassion and the love. Blessings to our knowings of death. May all be blessed. May all be held. Blessings on life's journeys. Amen. Okay, joys and concerns. Of course, our primary concern today is still Ukraine. The attacks are mounting in severity. Now we have warnings of chemical attacks or nuclear attacks. That would be a new page turn, which would lead to, I'm not sure what, it would be pretty horrible if that actually happens. There have been some hopeful signs. The Russians have said their main interest is in freeing the Donbass, which is the eastern part of Ukraine, instead of the whole country. So there is a question that maybe they will return. Things have not gone the way the Russians had planned. I've heard over 15 to 20,000 have been killed and over 40 or 50,000 have been captured or fled or are missing. So, and their tanks are being destroyed right and left. They still do not have control of the skies. The Ukrainian Air Force is putting up a tremendous fight. The Ukrainians are still asking for more weapons, more airplanes, a no-fly zone. You've heard people talk about that. The no-fly zone would put us in direct conflict with Russia. We would be shooting down Russian planes, which that would bring us to the brink of war instantaneously. So that's the reason they are resisting that. So just like any war, there's complications, there's pulls and pushes, tugs, things that people want, things that people play for propaganda purposes. We want to keep all these people in our hearts and minds. We want to push our prayers out that people maintain a real sensible focus on what's going on and try to find a sensible way out. Any other concern? Yes?
I'd like a candle for NATO as well. You know, they've been through ups and downs over the years, always attempting to maintain strength in a much earlier period of adversity. Lots of disparaging remarks and undermining efforts by a predecessor of our current president, and yet they, under the circumstances, are stronger than ever. I like to think, despite the horrors of the war itself, that it's bringing them closer together, even in a stronger organization for the future.
And let's light a candle for our President Biden, a good man and a man who speaks from his heart and sometimes speaks from his heart when he's not supposed to. He has a tradition of doing that. When he said in his last interview in Poland that Putin should be removed from office in Russia, that was like a big, big boo-boo. You're not supposed to call for regime change. You're not supposed to call for the elimination of an opposing leader. He was saying that not in the definite sense. He was saying in the figurative sense that you don't want a leader in a country who's a butcher, but he let his mouth get away ahead of his head there. So of course everybody comes right back in and says that's not what he meant. He committed what I've heard is the cardinal sin of a politician. He spoke the truth. He spoke what he actually felt. And I think most people probably realize that he's not really calling for the assassination of Putin, but people will take that and run with it. So anything else?
Just incidentally, I read of an effort in Cleveland by a foundation, I believe, something with the name of KIND, or kindness. And through a billboard campaign, a multimedia campaign, they are attempting to basically get everyone to think more about kindness, believe it or not, civility, and all of those related wonderful traits that we seem to have lost in the last few years of hyper-partisanism.
Yes.
And so, I don't know why I'm bringing it up, Ken. I can't even think of its specific name, but it's something with the word kind in it, and it's quite popular in Cleveland and having some really success.
If we get the name, we'll put that on the Facebook page. And Margaret contacted us. If you want to, we talked before about supporting the Ukraine. If you go to the church, the Unitarian Church website, there is a donate button there, and they have a specific thing that they have a way to donate, and they say it goes through the international thing. Also, I went to the CBS website, and they have an actual list of organizations. I will put both of those down on the Facebook website, so you can find out if you want to donate money to support. One is like the International Red Cross. There's a Jewish Foundation. There's CARE, which is the UNICEF, comes from the United Nations. There's 4 or 5. These are organizations that are approved. They're honest. You know that the money donated to them will go to help the Ukrainians. All of these are peaceful donations. They're for food, supplies, medicine. If you want to donate weapons and bombs, I'm sure there's a place you could go, but I'm not going to send you there. So you'll have to find that on your own. Interestingly enough, there are Americans who are volunteering to fight in the Ukraine. Not only Americans, there's people from every country, and some of them are Ukrainian ancestry, and some are just people who feel strongly that the Ukraine should be defended. That's kind of an interesting outgrowth of whatever that kind of patriotism or loyalty is.
Tim,
Yes.
when you mentioned Biden, I thought, I don't know whether you could call this a joy, but I think it's a plus. In my humble opinion, we haven't had a good president since Truman. And I think Biden is the first good president we've had since Truman, which is a long time. I'm 76, and I was just 3 or 4 years old when Truman was in office. Biden, I laugh every time I hear these Republicans and other people put Biden down. He's weak. It's hilarious. He was very qualified to be president. He's a very smart guy. He's just, I think, will be the first good president we've had. And I think so far he's been really good. And I have to laugh about that idea that in relations with other countries, we can't say that a leader should be removed. That Yahoo that runs China should be removed. Yahoo that runs North Korea should be removed. And I'm afraid I would say so if I was the president also. And the Yahoo that runs Russia, those are good examples of bad government. Bad government.
I think we're safe from you being president.
True.
And I think
I wouldn't take the job. It's a crap job.
Exactly. And I would say that the people who revere Eisenhower and Kennedy would argue with you about the no good president since Truman. But everybody has a choice and a picture of what the perfect president is, and I will agree 100%, and Truman was not perfect. There is no perfect president. There are presidents who aspire to the job and who want to do the best job they can, and there are presidents who just want to get everything they can out of the job. I think the general consensus is we want someone who is not there for personal gain, but there to help the country.
Well, I said it was my opinion.
Yes.
I'm not a big Kennedy fan, and I'm not a big Eisenhower fan. Another thing I laugh about is the idea that because you're a general, you can be a good president. Eisenhower was a good general. President, my opinion, not so much, but I was there for Eisenhower. I was a little older when Eisenhower. I remember I liked Ike Buttons and him beating Adlai Stevenson and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Very well.
And I remember the interstate highway system, which that's the major thing that Eisenhower accomplished. So,
That's, you get pluses and minuses.
yes.
And that was a plus.
So, and we'll continue this every Sunday as we come along. Your comments are more than welcome. All right, message. This is kind of all over the place. This is on grief and bereavement. You can start from anywhere and you can go from anywhere. It can be a really overwhelming subject, but it doesn't have to be. You can deal with grief through multiple ways, and one of the ways is humor. As an EMT and a nurse, I can tell you about black humor, and I'm sure most of you know about dark humor. When you're in overwhelmingly difficult situations and the stress is really high, people make jokes, and they make them among their own community. They're jokes that people who are not connected to that community would find gross or appalling or insensitive or insulting. But the people who are in that community know what those jokes are about, and they know what they're meant for, which is to relieve the tension and basically to create another sense of community. You are an insider when you tell those kind of jokes to yourself and your friends and your work companions, because you know that you're not trying to insult anybody, you know you're not trying to demean or belittle anybody. You're just trying to lighten the mood of that situation, which it can be pretty serious. Okay, grief can be caused by many things. We usually think about it as the loss of a loved one, but many things can cause grief. A diagnosis of cancer for that loved one can cause you to have grief before there is a death. A diagnosis of cancer for yourself can cause you to go through the steps of grief. The loss of a pet can cause amazing grief. I've always been amazed, and I guess this is my peculiarity, but something that, to me, animals are innocent. No human being is completely innocent. No human being has gone through life without hurting someone else or causing some problems or making some mistakes. Animals don't do that. So when I see an animal suffer, I see innocence suffering. And when an animal is lost, I see something is lost that is like a child who has never caused anybody a problem. And I don't mean they haven't chewed up your furniture or taken a crap on your favorite carpet. I'm talking a real problem. Something like a house fire or a loss of a job can cause grief. Those are legitimate items. I mean, you legitimately and you should grieve the loss of a job that you care about. If you lose your house in a fire or you lose a prized possession, something that you care about, that is a reason to grieve. So don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be suffering or you shouldn't have sorrow because of that. Also, the loss of a cause or an idea. If you're rooting for a particular politician and that politician loses, you have a reason to have grief. You have a reason to be sorrowful about that. If you have a treasured idea that is very important to you, and that idea is destroyed or lost or proven false, whether you're a scientist or a religious adherent, and something happens to destroy your faith in that religion, that is a period of grief. And I think most of you have heard about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's the one who did that first study of grief. And she came out with the 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Denial is, and you've heard that many times, when you see the TV news, something happens, there's an accident, a fire, a plane crash, The people say it's not true. I don't believe it. It can't be happening. If a tornado comes to your village or your town, this couldn't have happened. It's not really true. They just deny that it's really there. That's the initial response. Anger, the next response, they're mad. Why did this happen to somebody I love? Or why did this happen to me? It's not fair. I didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve that. Bargaining, and then you've heard many people, I will do anything. God, please give me my son back or my daughter back. Give me my wife or my husband back, my grandfather back. I'll do anything. I'll start saying the prayers every day. I'll quit smoking. You've all heard all of these, and it's a natural response trying to find a way to get around the grief you're suffering. Depression, then you go through that period where you don't want to eat, you don't want to talk, you don't want to think, you don't get out of bed in the morning. Life seems completely flat, dark, and black, and you don't want to have anything to do with it. And then the last step, which hopefully everybody can get to, is acceptance. That does not mean the end of grief. It doesn't mean that you stop suffering. It just means that you can smile, that you can eat, you can start to talk to people again, you can start that road back. And that's what people will tell you about grief, is it never ends. To finish here, I've got a whole bunch of quotes that I've read. Some of them are pretty amazing. Each is a little bit different, and each has a little nugget of wisdom, which I think is important. To me, grief is tempered by the degree of grief. No person is without sin, as I said, and no animal has willfully sinned. A dog doesn't blame others for things that they do. So, my first introduction to this came when I was in high school and read a book called Germinal by Emile Zola. You all know of my affinity for animals. Let me tell you a little bit about Emile Zola and the word Germinal. In 1884, he went down into the mines in France to do the documentation for what was to become the novel Germinal. Posing as a secretary for a member of the French Chamber of Deputies, he descended into the pits wearing his city clothes, this is in the 1800s, his frock coat, his high stiff collar, and a stiff high hat, and carrying a notebook and a pen. One day Zola was with the miners who were serving as his guides 150 feet below the ground when Zola noticed an enormous workhorse, a percheron pulling a sled piled with coal through a tunnel. Zola asked, "How do you get that animal in and out of the mine every day?" At first the miners thought he was joking, and then they realized he was serious and a city boy. And one of them said, "Mr. Zola, don't you understand? That horse comes down here once when he's a colt, barely more than a foal, and still able to fill the buckets that bring us down here." That's the buckets that the miners descend into the mine and that they pull the coal out of the mine. "That horse grows up down here. He grows blind down here after a year or two from the lack of light. He hauls coal down here until he can't haul it anymore. And then he dies down here, and his bones are buried down here." When Zola transfers this revelation from the pages of his documentation notebook to the pages of Germinal, it makes the hair on your arms stand on end. You realize without the need of amplification that the horse is the miners themselves, who descend below the face of the earth as children and dig coal in the pit until they can dig no more. And then they are literally buried often down there. Grief can be the garden of compassion if you keep your heart open through everything. Your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom. That's by the poet and author from Persia, Rumi. All right, this is out of the book. It was from Batil, the doyen of the mine. That's the white feminine lead of the mine, the white horse who had lived before for 10 years. These 10 years he had lived in this hole, occupying the same corner of the stable, doing the same task along the black galleries without ever seeing daylight. Very fat, with a shining coat and good-natured air, he seemed to lead the existence of a sage, sheltered from the evils of the world above. In this darkness, too, he had become very cunning. The passage in which he worked had grown so familiar to him that he could open the ventilation doors with his head. He lowered himself to avoid knocks at the narrow spots. Without a doubt, he also counted his turns, for when he had made the regulation number of journeys, he refused to do any more and had to be led back to his manger. Now that old age was coming on, his cat's eyes were sometimes dimmed with melancholy. Perhaps he vaguely saw again, in the depths of his obscure dreams, the mill at which he was born, a mill placed on the edges of the Scarp River, surrounded by large fields over which the wind always blew. Something burnt in the air, an enormous lamp, the exact appearance of which escaped his beast's memory. And he stood with lowered head, trembling on old feet, making useless efforts to recall the sun. That's an excerpt from the novel. I have the part where the horse dies in a mine collapse. There's no way I could read it. I tried to find someone else reading it for you to hear because it's an incredibly moving piece, but I was not able to do that. So I highly recommend, if you want to read a novel about reality written in the 1800s, about putting yourself into what that horse was feeling, I highly recommend Germinal. All right, these are some quotes that I want to read to you. If you find one that affects you, let me know. We can stop and talk about it, or we can talk about it afterwards. Grief does not change you, it reveals you. That's by John Green. I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are evil. J.R.R. Tolkien. These are quotes from writers. Most of these people you will recognize, and if not, I'll try and explain them to you. The darker the night, the brighter the stars. The deeper the grief, the closer is God. That's from Dostoevsky, from Russia. No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. C.S. Lewis. Without you in my arms, I feel an emptiness in my soul. I feel myself searching the crowds for your face. I know it is an impossibility, but I cannot help myself. Nicholas Sparks. Anybody recognize that name? Love story? Come back, even as a shadow, even as a dream. Euripides. Even in the time of ancient Greeks, they talked about grief. Grief is an amputation, but hope is incurable hemophilia. You bleed and bleed and bleed. David Mitchell. He's the author of some pretty amazing books and a movie called The Cloud Atlas. He didn't make the movie, he wrote the basis for the movie. There is no grief like the grief that does not speak. Longfellow. Grief is a curious thing. When it happens unexpectedly, it is a Band-Aid being ripped away, taking the top layer off a family. And the underbelly of a household is never pretty. Ours is no exception. You care so much as though you feel as though you will bleed to death with the pain of it. J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter book author. Only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But the same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. Tolstoy. Grief is a most peculiar thing. We're so helpless in the face of it. It is like a window that will simply open of its own accord. The room grows cold, and we can do nothing but shiver. But it opens a little less each time, and a little less, with one day we wonder what has become of it. Arthur Goldman. Someday, sometimes, only one person is missing, and the whole world seems depopulated. Lamartine. How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. Winnie the Pooh. Grief is just love with no place to go. Jamie Anderson. I don't think of all the misery, but of all the beauty that remains. Anne Frank. What we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose, for all that we love deeply becomes a part of us. Helen Keller. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom. That's again Rumi. The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to be the same. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. When someone you love dies and you're not expecting it, you don't lose all at once. You lose them in pieces over a long time. The way the mail stops coming, the way the scent fades from the pillows, and even from the clothes in the closets and drawers. Gradually, you accumulate the parts that are gone just when the day comes when there's a particular missing part that overwhelms you with the feeling that they're gone forever. There comes another day and another specifically missing part. John Irving. It's so true when all is said and done. Grief is the price we pay for love. Absence is a house so vast that inside you will pass through its walls and hang pictures on the air. Grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm, sometimes it's overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. Grieving doesn't make you imperfect, it makes you human. I am because you were. I am because you were. Anonymous. Death is a challenge. It teaches us not to waste time. It tells us to tell each other right now that we love each other. Leo Biscaglia. Grief is the price we pay for love. Queen Elizabeth II. I know in my head that she has gone. The only difference is I am getting used to the pain. It's like discovering a great hole in the ground. To begin with, you forget it's there and you keep falling in. After a while, it's still there, but you learn to walk around it. Rachel Joyce. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always irregularly. Space is filled with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Maya Angelou. The pain passes, but the beauty remains. Renoir, the artist. It's hard to forget someone who gave you so much to remember. Anonymous. Grief is loved, turned into an eternal missing. Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear. Also anonymous. It's so much darker when a light goes out than it would have been if it had never shone. John Steinbeck. Whoever said that loss gets easier with time was a liar. Here's what really happens. The spaces between the times you miss them grow longer. Then when you do remember to miss them again, it's still with a stabbing pain to the heart. And you have guilt. Guilt because it's been too long since you missed them last. You cannot die of grief, though it feels as if you can. A heart does not actually break, though sometimes your chest aches as if it is breaking. Grief dims with time. It is the way of things. There comes a day when you smile again and you feel like a traitor. How dare I feel happy? How dare I be glad in a world where my father is no more? And then you cry fresh tears because you do not miss him as much as you once did. And giving up your grief is another kind of grief. Lauren Hamilton. Life seems sometimes like nothing more than a series of losses, from beginning to end. That's the given. How you respond to those losses, what you make of what's left, that's the part you have to make up as you go. When one person is missing, the whole world seems empty. Every one of us is losing something precious to us, lost opportunities, lost possibilities, feelings we can never get back again. That part of what it means to be alive. It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Grief and love are conjoined. You don't get one without the other. There are three needs of the griever: to find the words for loss, to say the words aloud, to know the words have been heard. She was no longer wrestling with grief, but could sit down with it as a lasting companion and make it a sharer in her thought. George Eliot, also an author, and as you probably know, a woman, not a man. The song has ended, but the melody lingers on. Irving Berlin. How lucky I am to have found something that makes saying goodbye so hard. A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh. Now something so sad has hold of us that breath leaves and we can't even cry. Charles Bukowski. It's like I have this large black hole in my brain. It's sucking the life out of me. There are answers in there, so I sit for hours and stare. No matter how hard and long I look, I see only darkness. Katie McGarry. Absence and death are the same, only that in death there is no suffering. Theodore Roosevelt. All things grow with time except grief. That's a Jewish proverb. When the heart grieves over what it has lost, the spirit rejoices over what it has left. That's a Sufi statement. Nothing grieves us that can be called little. By the eternal laws of proportion, a child's loss of a doll and a king's loss of a crown are events of the same size. Mark Twain. Here is what I know: death abducts the dying, but grief steals from those left behind. Catherine Owen. No matter how prepared you think you are for the death of a loved one, it still comes as a shock. It still hurts very deeply. Billy Graham. Parting is inevitably painful, even for a short time. It's like an amputation. I feel a limb is being torn off, without which I shall be unable to function. And yet once it's done, life rushes back into the void, richer, more vivid, and fuller than before. Anne Morrow Lindbergh. If you remember, her son was kidnapped and killed, just a young boy. Grief can derange even the strongest and most disciplined of minds. George R.R. Martin, author of the famed series on TV. The more sympathy you give, the less you need. Malcolm Forbes, who is one of our early famous rich people. Everyone can master grief, but that who has it. William Shakespeare. When it is darkest, we can see the stars. Ralph Waldo Emerson. God gave us, the author of Peter Pan. Where you used to be, there is a hole in the world, which I find myself constantly walking around in the daytime and falling in at night. I miss you like hell. Edna St. Vincent Millay, an Indiana poet. I miss her all the time. I know in my head that she has gone, but the only difference is I am getting used to the pain. It's like discovering a great hole in the ground. To begin with, you forget it's there and keep falling in. After a while, it's still there, but you learn to walk around it. Grief changes shape, but it never ends. That great philosopher Keanu Reeves. Given a choice between grief and nothing, I would choose grief. Sorrow is so easy to express, yet so hard to tell. Joni Mitchell. Pain is certain, suffering is optional. That's from the Buddha. All right, comments?
Back to the book that you read and concerning the horse in the mine, I'm curious, how did you come by that book? Was it recommended? What age did you read the book?
I think I was like 12 or 13. I was in junior high. The library was between, I've been an inveterate reader since I was a little kid, since I could even decipher what a book was. The library was between my house and the school, the junior high that I went to. So I would always stop at the library on the way home. The librarian was a really nice old lady who used to hand me books. Germinal was one of those books that was printed in like 1900 in a fake leatherette binding. It was all torn, shredded up. She gave me that book because she said, the library is discarding it, and I know you would really like this. And that started me on that thing of reading Victor Hugo, Emile Zola. For some reason, I started out reading the French authors with pretty turgid, pretty heavy-duty stuff to be reading when you're a kid. But it's like we talk about culture shapes you. That's kind of what has shaped my beliefs and my faith in what's going on. So.
Do you still have that book today?
Yes, I still have it in my library.
Wow.
I can bring it in if you want to see it. Yeah, there's, and I'm sure all of you, I've got shelves and shelves of books that I read through college, that I read through, as I was growing up. That was my thing when I was in high school. I'd go up to my room and read. That's just that's why I'm nearsighted. Still don't need glasses to read, but I need glasses to see far away because I screwed my eyes up by doing nothing but reading when I was a kid. And yet, we were farmers, so I spent the other half of the day hauling manure and leading cattle around and planting corn and filling silos. So to me, it was an idyllic life. I would never trade it for anything. Okay, joys and concerns. I guess we're kind of talking about those now.
Pretty much covered it, I think.
I think we pretty much covered it. I hope I didn't want to, and for anybody who's watching on Facebook, which I know we have 10 or 15 people, I do not want to hurt you. I do not want to cause pain. I don't want to cause you to have grief. But I want you to understand that you can share grief, that grief is not something that is localized to only one person. Only one person is going to feel it. Grief can be shared, and it's lightened when it's shared. To feel happy again is not impossible. It's nothing to feel guilty about. It's something that's a natural process. When I went through the stages of grief, not everybody goes through those stages 1, 2, 3, 4. You drop back from one to another. You go back from depression to denial. You go back from depression to anger. You can go back from understanding and acceptance. You can go back to anger and denial. There is no right way. There is nobody can tell you this is the way you should do it. The main thing I want to encourage you to do is share, is be part of other people. Do not withdraw. That's what depression is when you withdraw and become totally alone. You are really never alone as long as there are people around who care. Joys and concerns, anybody that's, what's her name that we haven't heard from? Dolly. I hope Dolly's doing okay. I haven't heard from her. I need to text her or email her and see what's going on. I'm not aware of anybody else. We have our other shut-ins, which I guess we should get a list of them and start reading them off. People who used to attend and I'm hoping are still able to see what's going on and be part of the congregation. If any of you people at home need something, please let us know. All right. Our offering. Thou Swell by Richard Rogers. topic on grief, there's always room for humor. You can see that picture, and I'm sure any of you who have dogs have seen that picture. There was a spider, but it's gone now. So even though they are innocent creatures, they are not above lying to get out of trouble. All right, our final hymn is Filled with Loving Kindness, and that is also a handout.
You'll notice on there at the bottom it says note, and then read that because you'll actually have you'll have three verses to sing.
May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. That's based on a Buddhist meditation and something to take heart in this time of troubles. Our chalice extinguishment reading is Grief is a Holy Thing by Tracy Barrett Welsler. Against a blurred background of fall foliage, several old gravestones on a cemetery lawn. That's the picture I was supposed to have shown. Our grief is a holy thing. It is proof that another life touched ours in a profound way. It is the mark of love, the mark of connection, and the mark of a life well lived. We will mourn, we will cry, we will miss. Time will move on and we may not hurt like we hurt now, but then a thought or a bit of music or a smell will remind us and it will all come back. Those moments, too, are holy. They're reminders of that connection that will never fully go away. It is important to hold on to that connection because it is through those memories that love and connection stay alive. Our postlude, As Time Goes By. through grief, and a grief by choosing to do the noble thing, as Rick did, and giving up the love of his life, in a situation he knew that he couldn't have come out the way he fantasized, that he wanted it to come out, but a way that he knew was the right thing to do. A true story of grief and forgiveness. Okay, our final thing is from Yellowstone, our final picture. Old Faithful, as we are here for you, Old Faithful, and we are giving on a regular basis. So that closes our service in New Madison. Hope things were decent for you tonight. There are donuts and the water's hot for coffee. So we'll see you next Saturday for the
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock for the cleanup, and we'll get the table set up.
Hi, Kenny. Go on, Greg.
On this.
Clean up the church. We're hosting on a radio.